Okay. All right. Awesome. Everybody's here. Fantastic. Nice to see everybody.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Oh, this is great. So we'll just give everybody another minute or two. I see some people are just logging on. This is the first time we did a registration for Zoom. So might have been a little confusing for some people, but it looks like most everybody made it. So that's fantastic. All right. Oh, a couple more. And then maybe Deepali, you want to get us started?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out your time today. Afternoon, morning, evening, I'm not sure. I am in Toronto. So for all y'all who are in Pacific Coast, good afternoon. I hope the weather is doing okay. I know it was a little hot over there. So let's hoping that it went a little down. So we'll wait a little bit and start with a land acknowledgement. And then we will get started. If you are somewhere else, which is not in Vancouver, feel free to write it in the chat wherever you're from. If you are in Vancouver, oh well, we already know. But you can still share wherever you are if it's in a different part of Vancouver. Let us give other folks a little bit more time. Ooh, we have Richard joining from Auckland, New Zealand.
Hello. Sorry. Hello.
Hi, Richard.
Good morning. Or whatever time
good morning. Oh my God. Yeah.
7 a.m. here, so it's cool.
Well, thank you so much for taking out your time and your morning to spend with us.
I look forward to it and spending some time with the great man to your right.
Tom, they're talking about you, in case you didn't know. Okay, we have Jennifer joining from Winnipeg, Nathan from Bend, Oregon, who is vacationing in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you so much for taking out your time, Nathan, on your vacation to join us today. Okay, we have Bruno joining from Argentina. Love this. Okay, so Vanessa, should we start? Okay, perfect. So let's start with a land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates as part of the treaties, land and territory of Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous people inhabited and care for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe people. The land that is home to the Métis, and the most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. All right. Thank you so much for people who have just joined in. We are here to be a part of this G.R.O.W campaign that Low Entropy is actually hosting. So this is one of our first Connect Circles in this big campaign that we're having. And the theme of this Connect Circle is helping others. Tom was very generous and kind enough to be a part of the circle today and share his wisdom and his experience. So Vanessa, I pass it on to you to introduce a little bit more about Tom and, let's get into the good stuff.
Yeah, you did a great introduction. Thank you, Deepali. And thank you, Tom. Super grateful to have you here. I think most of you know that Tom has been a huge influence in my life and actually is what Tom inspired us for the name of our nonprofit, Low Entropy. So really looking forward to having you share your wisdom with us, Tom. And for anyone who has any questions specifically pertaining to this week's theme, which is all about helping others, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And DePauli will be reading them out if you like, or calling you forward so you can ask your questions. And we'll do our best to get to everybody. So Tom, maybe I'll put it over to you to say a few words before we get started.
Okay, tell me, Vanessa, what's the schedule for today? How long would you like me to speak?
Oh yes, so we have 1 hour.
Okay. Well, about helping others. That's a very broad subject, but it's one that's kind of close to the work that I do. And I will speak just for a while, and then I'll open it up for people to ask questions, because it's your own sense of helping other and how you perceive it and what it means to you that's really important. Not so much listening to a lecture about it, but actually getting to participate in a conversation about it is a lot more meaningful. So I will just spend a little time talking about it, and that is that helping others, we can think of that as, well, it's a nice thing to do. Be polite to others, that's a nice thing to do too. But it's much, much more than just a nice thing to do. Helping others is very fundamental to even why we're here, to what our existence is, to the reality that we live in. It's a fundamental part of our existence. We're here to, I put it in some sciencey terms, but because I'm a physicist, but to lower our entropy, to use Vanessa's name. And what that means is to care about others, to be cooperative. Lowering your entropy is about a social system. Okay? Consciousness represents a social system. We're all individuated units of consciousness, and we interact with, ourselves, but with other consciousnesses, with other people, with other critters and things. We interact even with the environment, with the planet, with the atmosphere, with the land. We interact with all sorts of things. And the way we evolve our low entropy, the way we evolve our quality of consciousness, is by optimizing that interaction between else and everything else we interact with. Okay, that means we interact with cooperation, with caring, with understanding, with compassion. These are the ways we should interact with all, not just other people, but with all. And that caring extends to, the environment as well, the lands and the waters and the trees and all the plant life. So if we go through life caring about others, a lot more than caring about ourselves, which is just the opposite of caring about others, is basically being self-centered. It's all about us. What's important is what we want, what we need, what we can get. You see, that's the opposite side. So we have those two choices. Whenever we do anything, whenever we interact with anybody, with anything, we have these choices. Is our interaction based on how can we help? What can we do? How can we be of service? How can we make it better for everybody? If those are our motivators, if those are our intents, then whatever it is we do will work out well. And we will be happy in doing it. Because when you give, when you care, when you love, then you end up being a happy, a joyous, a person that feels like there is meaning and significance in your life. You feel satisfied. In other words, you just feel good about being a part of something larger than yourself, about being part of the solution rather than part of the problem by being a contributor. This just makes you happy, makes you smile, makes you very positive. And that's where happiness, that's where satisfaction comes from, not in getting everything you want, not in accumulating stuff, not in it being about you, but happiness and joy and satisfaction in your life comes from giving, from helping, from caring, from being compassionate, from wanting to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So it's not just a nice thing to be or a nice thing to do. It is that, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's the bedrock. It's the fundamental thing in our lives that makes our lives worth living. You know, it's the thing that makes our being here significant and important. So there really isn't anything much more important than being helpful, wanting to be a part of the solution, wanting to help other people, wanting to connect and share. That is fundamental to us. It's fundamental to our shared environment, our shared reaction. We don't live, individual lives. We, even if it were available to us, none of us would want to go out and sit on an island someplace with a palm tree and just live our life in solitude. That's not the way we're made. That isn't what satisfies us. If we were in that situation, we would spend all of our time thinking and trying to figure out how to get off that island and get to where other people were. You see, we're social creatures. We're interactive creatures, not only social, interacting with each other, but we're also interacting with the planet, interacting with everything. That's what we do. We connect, we interact. That's our nature. And the point of our even being here in this reality frame and existing here is to grow up, increase the quality of our consciousness, become love. And we do that through our interactions. It's what we give. You don't sit on an island by yourself and become love. That doesn't work. If you don't go in a cave and live as a hermit and become love, it doesn't work that way. Becoming love is about other. Matter of fact, we even can define love that way. Love is about other. If it's about self, then that's not love. Okay, that's something else. Love is something you give away. It's not something you trade. It's not something you negotiate. It's something you give away. Love has no requirements. You've heard of non-conditional, unconditional love? Well, that's actually the only kind of love there is. If there are conditions, it's not love. It's a deal or a bargain or an arrangement. So love is all about other, all about giving. So I guess my point here, I won't say a whole lot more than that. I'll open up to questions, but this general theme of caring and being nice and helping each other is not just a thing to do. It's not just a thing to act. There's a big difference between being helpful and acting helpful, between being kind and acting kind, between being self-centered and acting self-centered. When we're acting, we are living in we're living in a image. Our image. We have an image that we have of ourselves, who we think we should be. We think we should be kind. And if we think we should be kind, then we see situations in which we could be kind, so we're kind because we think we should. Well, that's the intellect telling us that kindness is a good thing to do. And then we do it because we think that's the right thing to do. That's acting kind. Being kind is a different thing. When you just are kind, you don't have to think about it. If you see a place where you can be helpful, you just do it. You don't really think about it. It's not because I should, or, well, if people see me doing this, they'll think better of me. You know, they'll think I'm a kind person and I'm a good, helpful person because I'm doing these good, helpful things. So I will join other people and I'll join organizations and we'll all, be helpful because that'll make me feel better about myself and it'll make other people feel better about me. Well, that's your intellect. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's civilizing. It's nice if everybody would act more kind and act more helpful, but it won't help you grow up. It won't help you be kind. That's something that you are, not something that you do. Being kind, being helpful is part of who you are. It's something you have to become.
So Tom, Bruno's asking, how do I know if I'm being kind or if I'm just acting kind?
Okay. Well, I was about done then. So Bruno, that was perfect. That's about the time for me to stop and you folks that start asking questions. That is a very good question. And if you don't really know the answer to that question in your own mind, then you're in this process of becoming. Okay. You're in the middle of this process, becoming. Oftentimes, people aren't sure because they live out of their intellects and they judge everything by their intellects. So they look at it intellectually and they say, well, am I acting or am I being? And the intellect looks at it and says, well, actions would be the same either way. A person acting and a person being has the same actions. They're both helping that little old lady across the street. Okay, what's different is the motivation. What's different is the intent. What's different is the why are they helping that little old lady across the street? Is it because the intellect said, oh, this is something you should do. You should go do that. Or is it just organic to that person? They see somebody in need that needs some help and they just do it. It's not a matter of thinking whether it's what I should do or not. It's just, oh, look, somebody in trouble. Somebody needs some help. There's a blind person needs to get across this 6-lane intersection and they're obviously frightened. Let me go see if I can help. And you don't think about whether this is what you should do or not. You don't look at your watch and say, well, this is going to make me 2 minutes late. And, can I afford those 2 minutes? Or, I wonder how long this is going to take. You just do it because it's the right thing to do. So it's a matter of looking at your motivation, Bruno. It's a matter of knowing why you do things. Do you do it because it's the way you are and you couldn't do anything else? It's just the natural thing to do. Or do you do it because you think about it and your intellect tells you that you should, and you do it because you believe you should do it? There's a fine line there. And when you're in transition between becoming kind, usually you act kind first, right? Because you have this intention, oh, I'd like to be more kind. So you start acting more kind. But there's a point where that acting changes over to being. And I guess that's the point I'm making. Acting kind is wonderful. We would hope everybody would act more kind toward other people. Acting is very civilizing, but it doesn't really help you grow up and be the better person. So look at your own motivations for why you do the things you do. If you just do them because that's who you are, it's what you have to do, then that's working from what I call the being level, or the intuitive level. You just intuitive want to help. If it's something you do as a calculation that you should do it, or that would be the right thing to do, then you're probably in the process of becoming, but still working on it, which is good. we usually work on it before we can become it. And sometimes they call that faking it before you make it, right? You fake it before you make it. You act, whether it's the way you are or not, until you make it. But if in your mind, all you really want to accomplish is a better image, then you'll fake it and continue to fake it, and you'll always fake it, and it'll always be fake. If what you really want to do underneath is grow up, become kind, then you will fake it a little while and it will transition into becoming, and you will be kind, because that's what you want to be. If what you really want, though, is for other people to look at you and say, oh, yeah, Susie Smith, she's really kind. She helps everybody out. She's such a nice person. If that's what you want, recognition, if you want your ego to get massaged for how kind and nice you are, then you'll fake it and you'll not make it. You'll just stay faking it. So there's not a problem with working from your intellect, but that should just be a temporary as you become caring of other people. And that only happens by changing who you are. You become a different person.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for your question. Tom, we have Phil and Nathan who have their hands up. You guys can unmute yourself, and whatever your question is, just go ahead.
Hey guys, thanks so much for sharing. This is Phil. Tom, thank you so much. You began, it's a really fascinating question here, the difference between acting and becoming kind. I think it's really important. And I think you began to already touch upon some of those differences, in the midst of me raising my hand. But if you don't mind, if you could touch upon a little bit more about the becoming part. I know you mentioned motivation and intention, and act. You have to kind of act a little bit to start to kind of condition those neurons in the spiritual state to be a certain way. But can you speak a little bit more? And I know that question probably goes pretty deep into many facets of being, but more about the becoming kind part and what that looks like, and how you become kind eventually, and what that feels like, and the things that are done, and just anything else you feel is relevant to that. Thank you so much.
Well, the becoming, the being level, when I talk about, being kind, is you're kind, you're acting kind because you are kind. And the main ingredient that takes you down that path to becoming kind is a desire to be so. It's an intention that you really care about other people. You see, if you really care about other people, then you will become kind. If you care about yourself, then you'll want your ego stroked for people to like you, for people to think you're kind. And you will act toward creating an image such that people will like you. You will act the way you think you should be. So you'll like yourself better, and other people will like you better, but that's about you, you see. That's a self-centered place of beginning. Whereas when you are kind, it's all about other. It's not about self. So the difference between the real you and the image you have of you, or the image that you present to other people and often present to yourself. So the way to become kind is to really care about other people and to not be so much about yourself, not to be so self-focused and self-centered. So that's the process. That's the main thing. That's kind of the watershed spot, it's that difference in motivation. Why do I do the things I do? Is it my intellect telling me I should be that way? Or is it just because I really care? I can't really see myself being any other way. It's just who I am. I care about people. So when I see people and I see some way that I can be helpful, I want to do that. It's what makes me happy. That sort of thing. It's what makes me feel fulfilled. So that's kind of the difference. Now, when you are kind, you usually don't think of it, and you don't even think of yourself as being kind. You just see people that need your help when you can give help, and you give it. You don't think, oh, that was good of me. Oh, I was glad I was able to, to do that in public where everybody could see that, that I was a good person. You don't have any of those thoughts about that. You just do it because you care about people. So you get there by developing this idea of becoming love, by caring, by making it about other, not about self. And it's a matter of being aware of what your intentions are. Why do you do the things you do? Does your intellect tell you that is the right way to be and you're just following that intellect? Or is it just the way you are? Fine line in the beginning, but once you grow up and let go of that ego that wants to have a certain image, it becomes pretty obvious. It's not such a fine line, and it's not all that subtle. You can see there's a big difference between being kind and acting kind. It's a real big difference, because there are a whole lot of people who are very good at acting and not very good at really caring. Acting may even be part of their profession, or acting is part of their, part of their image, part of what makes them important in their own mind. And they find that it works, so they continually work out of their, out of their intellect. Well, the problem with that is, like I say, it's very civilizing, but the problem with that is when the going gets tough, when, all the nice things go away and you're just left with some really rock hard and unpleasant decisions, if you're just acting, that acting stops. And you go from kind, to mean, to self-serving, to it's all about you. And you make that, you just turn around on a dime, and you're only kind when it really works for you to be kind. That's the difference. So, Phil, I don't know if I'd made it any easier. It's not it's a thing of being. I can't tell you in an intellectual way about being. Being, you just have to be it to understand it. But anybody can keep track of their intentions. And if you think about it, should I help that lady across the street? And you come to a conclusion that you should, think about, well, why should you? And if you think, well, I just should because that would be a good thing for me to do, well, that's still intellectual. If you just see the person and there isn't any question, you don't think about it at all. You just do it because that's who you are. So just being aware of your motivations is the way you kind of work that out. And if you're not sure, it's because you're, like I say, you're in between. You're still in that process. And most people are, most people are still in that process.
Thank you so much, Phil, for your question and taking out your time for your vacation to spend with us. We have Richard with the next question. If everyone wants to see, it's also in the chat, but Richard, over to you for you to ask your question.
Thank you, Deepening. I think Tom's already given me the answer. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
I'm work in progress. Really close to a bit of tears. It's not about acting. My strong intuition is that I'm here to, after 53 years of egocentric, that I'm finally here to spend some time mentoring, sorry, I'm crying, talented youth, mainly males, to bring forward solutions to humanity's problems. When I cry, I just know it's right for me. But I'm in fear. It's little me. How do I dissolve fear? I think you've given me the answer. Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah.
It's really, how do I dissolve fear so that little me can become the big me and do everything that you've mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, I've got it. I've got it, Richard. Okay. Again,
How do I dissolve fears? Or my
Okay.
fear? Which, yeah, that's it. Sorry, there was a lot of story there.
okay. You dissolve fear first off by having a very strong intention to let it go. You have to really want to let the fear go. And it looks like you're there. You've made it to that point. That's obvious, you know, is this something that's real? It's not just an intellect saying, oh, that would be nice. Yeah, I should do that. You are really feeling deeply inside that that is what you want to do. So that's the first step. And you've gotten to the first step. You want to get rid of that fear. Now, there's several ways you can go about it. And some ways are better for some people than others. It just depends on the individual. One way is to look at the fear, you know, let the fear, don't push the fear down when it comes up. Look at it, embrace it, say, what is this fear? Where does it come from? Why do I feel this way? How long have I felt it? Have I always felt this way? Or, you know, did I just start, you know, after I was a teenager or whenever, you know, look at it, do a little session with yourself. And this usually works best in meditation. If you can get into kind of a meditation state, that helps. It helps you be honest with yourself, and it helps you see deeply into things. It keeps your intellect from constantly yammering, you know, trying to make you feel better, because the intellect will say, oh, you're all right, you're doing fine, and that's really not a problem, and don't worry about that. And, you know, that's the ego is constantly telling you that. So you get in a meditation state, where the ego tends to sit down and be quiet and feel the fear and embrace it and say, what is it? What is it? Where does this, you know, where is this attached to me? How did it come out this way? What am I really afraid of? And we often will come to answers to understand, and it won't be quick. It's not like, you know, in 10 minutes you're going to get the answer. It's maybe be in, you know, 10 weeks, you know, or a year. It takes time to do this. You will get a sense of where that fear came from. And it almost always comes from our, you know, younger self. It comes from us. You know, we take on those fears often when we're, you know, 5 and 6 and 8 and 12 and 15, and things happen and we start to feel like we're maybe unworthy or not good enough. And we have doubts about ourselves and our quality and what we're doing, and all of that negativity towards self is the root of most of that fear. And that negativity towards self often comes from the most trivial things in our childhood. Things that, you know, if we looked at them now intellectually, we'd say, oh, well, that was nothing. Okay, I was 6 years old and my 2 siblings got a teddy bear and I didn't get one. And I felt unworthy. You know, and then I went to talk to my parents and they said, not now, we're busy. Not now, we're busy. And I felt unworthy. And then you start believing you're unworthy, and then you start seeing your unworthiness everywhere. Once you start to believe it, you create it in your own mind and begin to see it. And now, you know, 40, 50 years later, you'll look at it and say, well, the fact I didn't get a teddy bear is probably a very small thing. It's just not that important in the big picture, but at the time it was, and you still have those feelings. You still have that same sense of not being good enough or not quite, you know, being right. And so you first thing you do is really embrace that fear and look at it, own it, and say, okay, that's me. I have that fear. Now, the next thing you say is, I don't want to have that fear. I want to get rid of that fear. And you don't say, I don't want to act like that. And because now we're back to acting. You do say, I don't want to be like that. Again, there's a real big difference. This is not about modifying your behavior. It's about modifying who you are. So you say, I don't want to be like that. And if you have that thought in your mind and you have it there all day long, you feel that way, that fear will start to shrink and just go away, because your positive intent will change probability and change facts. So you just have that intention, keep that intention present in your mind, and that fear will dissipate. So that's one way to do it. Now, there's other techniques that people can do. Sometimes you can just in your imagination go back to the earliest times where before you had that fear, and come up to the point where you think, oh, here are some of the events that made me feel that way. And it may not be just one event. It may be a whole lot of times mom and dad said, not now, we're busy. And after the 100th time you heard that, is maybe when you started to feel unworthy. But in any case, go back to that point, and in your imagination, look at that little boy and go give him a hug and send him some love and say, it's okay. You are worthy. They're just busy, and they are a little too self-centered to give to you what you need right now, but that's okay. That's about them. It's not about you. Forgive them. Let that be, you see? And so sometimes you can travel back in time and to yourself and give yourself that love and confidence that you need. So that's the second way that you can go about it. The third way is again the faking it until you make it way. And that is whenever you feel that fear starting to come up, that negativity towards self, not quite being sure that you're able to do this or that you're good enough or competent enough, every time you feel that, just stop. Let that be that button's been pushed. Now the fear button's been pushed and you're starting to feel that. Just stop and say, I don't want to be that way. I don't want that feeling. I don't want to feel that way. And then let that go down. But again, now that's your intellect doing that. We want to get to the point that it's not the intellect telling you to stop, but you just don't have the fear. But sometimes just stopping it, you'll find that in the beginning, it's hard to stop, but the more you try, the easier it gets. And as time goes by, it comes up less and less, and pretty soon it's gone. So, but think of the whole process as something that takes time. It's not a quick process. It's something you work on over a long period of time. And it may take, a month, or it may take a decade. It doesn't matter. You just keep working on it, and you will see that progress may be slow, but it's continuous. It works. And so it's not an easy thing to do, but I can guarantee that if you have an intention that you will let go of that fear, it will happen. It will happen. In time, you will succeed. It's not impossible. You just have to really want to do it.
Thank you
Tom.
so much, Richard, for having the courage to be open and vulnerable with us today. Thank you for that. I know personally it takes a lot of courage when you open up your heart amongst so many people. So thank you for showing that courage. Tom, our next, sorry. Thank you. Tom, our next question is from Rachel. Rachel, over to you.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for your words there and your speech. And Richard, thank you so much for being vulnerable, because I know that's not easy. And yeah, the more we share, the easier it becomes, as hard as that may be. I guess, Tom, I've done a lot of work personally myself. I've always been one of a helper, but putting other people before me was my biggest problem and biggest challenge. And I've read all the books and I've read spirituality, and I'm on the right path and I know what to do. But I didn't know how to feel anything within myself. My body was completely disconnected from my head. So although I had that caring nature of me, I didn't have that for myself because of an upbringing that was quite traumatic. And I didn't understand, yes, if you help people, do that, you know, do 1 to 10 in your steps, you'll be fine. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine. I made myself so sick over and over again. So I guess for me, what I've learned, and it probably relates to Richard as well, because I've gone through all of this where I've been in a lot of pain and I didn't understand why, and I lived in my head. So trauma by nature will disconnect you from the body so you don't feel anything, and will push every bit of energy to your head. So you're controlling, you're egotistical, you're going out to help, but that disconnection is just agony. That's the void that I've described myself as feeling. And I guess just hearing what you're saying, I love that, and I love helping people. But what I've learned is I had to help myself first, and I didn't. How could I have compassion for somebody? I've never felt it nor understood it in my life. I didn't understand what love was. If love was a verb, it was something. So I guess what I want to bring here today, it's taking me 30 years to get to where I am right now, to actually know that I now can self-soothe myself. I don't need people. I want people in my life. And that there's a big, huge difference in that. And just for me to understand how my body responded to this trauma and how it has helped me to survive up until today, for me to be able to actually, okay, now I can soothe myself. Now I have my little teddy bear, say, okay, Rachel, are you okay? You know, but it's very true. It's to go back to that little girl and say, we're okay. But I wish it was a point of, we don't have time for you. It was far worse than that, you know? So my interpretation of that, because children by nature are egotistical to get their needs met. So they do interpret it, there's something wrong with me, you know? And I guess what I want to share here is, it's years of work, but the end result is that you connect your body with your mind, whereby your mind is not running every day of your life telling you what to do, when you should do it, do this job, do that job, do like crazy towns. Whereas you connect with your body. And now I'm like, okay, Rachel, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And then you're in a line with yourself. Now I have compassion. Now I can look in the eyes of somebody else and feel their pain, or understand their compassion, or understand that although we're separated, we're connected. So yeah, I don't think there was a question in that more than a kind of a statement, but a connection with everybody here, that we are all the same. We're like trees connected underneath, but there's a trauma that blocks us from that, knowing that we are connected. And I guess the more I understand it, the more I go, aha, I get it. I understand now how much of society is actually held back because of these little things that are going on, are huge things. So yeah, just wanted to.
Yeah, that is quite true. And your experience is shared by a lot of people who have those same kinds of issues. It's very important that we don't feel negative about ourselves. When we feel negative about ourselves, then we really don't have that much to give. You can't give something away that you don't own. And if you don't own yourself, if you're not really in tune with yourself, then what you can give is all through your intellect. And you go through life, as you say, you're acting. Oh, yes, you can be very helpful to people, but you're helpful to people because you think you should be. So you act helpful. And you can't really be that way until you get rid of that negative stuff inside of you. The whole key is you have to become authentic. You have to be the real you, and you have to accept you as you are. And then after you accept you, you can change you. But you can't change you until you accept you. You see, that's the problem, because if you don't own it, when I say accept, I mean you own it. Okay, that's me. And once you own it, you can change it. Before you own it, you can't change it. It's just you. You're unable to get out of it. So the first step is becoming authentic. Otherwise, you may go through life being a very nice person and helping other people, but basically it's out of your intellect. And eventually what happens is you become resentful. Oh, I'm helping all these people. I'm the one who always helps. And, you know, and nobody's ever helping me, but I'm helping everybody else. And pretty soon that acting nice and helpful, if you don't really have, you know, if it's not really you and you're being it, starts to turn into resentment, starts to turn into self-pity, starts to turn into things that are more negative. And the whole negative spiral thing just goes down and down and down until it hits bottom. And that's usually where most people end up, is down on the bottom of that, where their life is so miserable and there's so much pain that they have to change. And they have to actually see things differently. And that's when they can start to go on that upward spiral and put it all back together again. Where they call that the dark night of the soul, you know, where you kind of crash and burn and everything's so awful that you finally deal with what's underneath. But yes, that is, that's an experience that many people have, particularly in our culture, which I'll call Western culture. We tend to lead with the intellect. The intellect is what we call, for the most part, it's what we call our consciousness. When people talk about consciousness in the West, they're talking about their intellect. That's it. But there's a whole lot more to your consciousness than that intellect. And yes, you have to like yourself. You have to accept yourself. You have to say, this is me. And even if you don't like yourself very much, but you have to at least accept, own yourself. Say, all right, I have these fears. I have these problems. I don't do relationships very well because I just have problems. I have all this fear that winds me up that I'm going to be hurt because I was hurt so often, you know, as a child or as an adult, either one. And you have to accept that, okay, that is the way I am. I have that fear. And this fear affects my choices. It affects how I interact with people. And I don't want it to. So now you have at least owned it. And because you own it, you can change it, you see. But until you get to that point where you can own it, you can't even change it. You're just stuck. And you can be stuck for years and years and years before you finally take ownership and then start changing it. And that's a slow path coming back. But yes, when it's this whole idea of growing up and becoming love, and love is unconditional. Okay, you might hurt me. That's all right. You might take advantage of me. That's okay. I can deal with that if I have to. It's not what I want, but I can deal with that if I have to. But I'm not going to make that stop me. I'm not going to let that stop me from reaching out, from making that connection, because making that connection is more important. I'll deal with the hurt. You see, that's when you are authentic, and you've kind of owned who you are and own your fears. You can say that, but before you own it, all you can do is kind of shrink back and shrivel away from it. And no, you know, I can't experience that. And you withdraw, which just, of course, makes everything worse. So indeed, that's this path to growing up is not an easy path for a lot of people. For some people, it's very easy, you know, but if you know, I've talked to a lot of people, and I find that the great majority will say they come from a dysfunctional family. You know, there's very, very few that say, oh, I came from a totally functional family. You know, we were all just love and peace and supported each other, and it was just great. Very few say that. That's uncommon. And where we come from dysfunctional families, that creates problems, attitudes toward ourselves, negativity, fear. And then we have to outgrow it. So good for you, Rachel. It's been, you know, like you say, it's been a long time coming, but it certainly is better once you get there, isn't it? It makes the life go from terrible to fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no turning back, but yeah, it was a hard journey for sure, but it's very freeing. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm sure a lot of people could resonate with your lived experience. Jeff, you had a question. I pass it on to you for you to ask your question.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Tom. Thanks for taking your time to talk with all of us and address these questions. I have a question similar to what you just mentioned a minute ago. If I'm becoming love and through that I'm giving to others and it's that selfless place, and you said, unconditionally loving means that I can, sometimes I'll get taken advantage of or I'll take the hurt. How do I differentiate or balance then my self-care and loving for others?
Okay. Well, you do have to like yourself. Okay. Loving yourself is a kind of an oxymoron in a sense, because love is about other. So loving yourself doesn't really compute. That's not the thing. You have to like yourself. Okay. Now you can like yourself and be willing to give, be willing to be taken advantage of in some way, but it's not, when you're giving, when you're caring about others, that's not that you become a doormat that everybody else can wipe their feet on and everybody else can use. It's not that way. There is a time to say no. There is a time to, say enough, not going down that path anymore. That's part of it. And how do you know when to do that and when to just let it slide? Well, you look at the entropy. And Vanessa named her organization very well, Low Entropy. But you look at the entropy of the situation. And what that entropy means is you look at the whole system, okay, which means you're a piece of it, but everybody you interact with, all of the interactions you have, all of the connections you have, and you look at that, and entropy is a measure of disorder, dysfunctionality, not working, not cooperating, not caring, it's that sort of thing. And if you look at yourself and all your connections with others and say, what choice, and I have a choice, I can just say, okay, I'll keep on keeping on, and it's not that big a deal. I can handle it. Or enough, stop. I refuse to go down this path any further with you. You look and say, what is the minimum entropy? In other words, where is the minimum dysfunction? Okay, so let's say you have a friend, and that friend is an alcoholic. And that alcoholic's always coming around and begging you for money because he wants to buy another bottle of wine. Okay, now, if you constantly just give him money because you've got enough extra money and he wants it, it'll make him feel better to get his bottle of wine and go get drunk. Well, you're also now an enabler. So you look at that and you can say, okay, in the short term, I'm making him feel better because right now he feels miserable. He's in the middle of withdrawals. He needs a drink of wine, so in the short term, he'd feel a lot better. And in the short term, I wouldn't miss $10, it's not big. So it's a short time, everybody's happy in the short term. But in the long term, you're not being helpful to him. In the long term, you're part of his problem. You're an enabler. So you look at that long term and say, all right, for long term, where is the low entropy path? Where's the path of the least dysfunction? Where's the path of the most happiness, the thing, that can come out the most positive? And then would be a time for you to raise up your hand and say, no, I'm not giving you any more money to buy wine. I don't want to enable you, but I will go with you to the next, AA, meeting and sit with you, and talk to you about it. I will, put some time into helping you get over your alcoholism, if you want, and I'll do these things for you, so you can do that. But there's a time to say no. If you're in a relationship that is abusive and you're being slapped or hit or hollered at or whatever all the time, you have to look at that and say, what's the, in the short term, just go along and don't make trouble, be the doormat. That seems like a good idea. but it's probably not a good idea in the long time, because where is it taking you? You see, you're getting more and more angry, more and more upset, more and more whatever. The other person is getting more and more abusive. So where's it going? It's going in a negative way. So it's a time to say, stop. I went out. I won't do this anymore. So this philosophy of love and caring is not a pacifist philosophy. There's a time to turn the other cheek, and there's a time to stand up and say no more. You see, and it just depends on your analysis of which one of those choices is the low entropy choice. And you just have to think about it. So there's times that, somebody will want you to do something that you don't care about. Your wife says, Jeff, I'd like you to repaint the bedroom purple. I'd like to have I've always wanted a purple bedroom. And you say, well, the paint's only like 2 years old. The paint's perfectly good. It doesn't need to be painted. And she says, yeah, I know, but I'd like it to be purple. And you think all of that trouble, the paint, the fumes, the getting it out, all that trouble, moving the furniture, and you don't particularly care about purple at all. You see, now that's probably a time when you should say, sure, sweetheart, I'd be glad to paint it purple for you if that's what you want. Because in the long term, you see, it doesn't really cost you that much. Okay, painting's a pain, but it'll be gone. It's only going to take you a day or half a day. So it's a half a day of discomfort and a little bit of money, but it'll make your wife happier for, the next couple of years. It'll be a big plus up. And if she's happy, guess what? You're happier too, you see? So you look at that and you say, well, of course, dear, I'd be happy to paint the bedroom all purple if that's what you like. You see, so in that way, you give in rather than, it doesn't need to be painted. That's silly. Purple room, it's going to make the house hard to sell. That's not a good idea. You can come up with 100 practical excuses why that's not a good idea. But the point is, she'd like it to be that way. And that's more important than all those excuses. You see, all those rational things that you can come up with of why it's a bad idea. Just the fact that she wants it is enough. So in that case, you bend to her will, even though it isn't practical. It will make the house harder to sell. You will probably end up repainting the room, in off-white, before you move. But it's all right. It'll be worth it. So you see, that's just an entropy calculation. You just look at it and say, what's the long-term positive and the long-term negatives here? And sometimes you say, no, will not go there, will not take this, will not put up with it. And other times you say, of course, sure, I'll do the extra work. Sure, I'll work an extra shift because, your child's sick and, you need to go home. So I'll work your shift for you. You can do those things and do them gleefully or gladly because you're helping and you're not just being abused. You're making things better for everybody in the long term. So it's a case-by-case basis, and you do it by looking for the low entropy solution. That's the way you do it. Matter of fact, to add to that, that's how you live your whole life, is looking at the low entropy solution. That's how you make all your choices. You look at that's how you tell right from wrong. What's right and what's wrong? Oh, those things are just relative. What's right one place is wrong someplace else. No, that's not the case. What's right is what lowers entropy, overall, long term. I don't mean like lowers it for an hour, but lowers it kind of in the bigger picture. And what's wrong is what raises entropy, makes things worse, makes things more dysfunctional, makes things, more fear. So it's just between the love and the fear. So if your choices are all made to lower entropy, then you'll have made the right choices, even if it turns out later that it was the wrong choice. In other words, you don't have to know everything. Because if I tell you, don't make a choice unless you know that, it's going to be the low entropy choice, there'll be some things that you won't be able to make a choice because you won't know whether that's the low entropy solution or not. You'll say, well, gee, I really don't know what the lower entropy solution is. Well, that's okay. You shouldn't not make a choice because you're afraid to make the choice poorly. Do your best. Say, all right, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to think about all the possible unintended consequences. This might affect this person, and that person affects another person, and just think of all the consequences, mostly unintended consequences that there are. Then realize you're imperfect. So you make it. You make your choice. Say, all right, I've made my choice. This is the low entropy way. Now you go do it. And now you just let those chips fall where they may, but you keep a good eye on those chips. You look at them, say, what happened? And then you assess it and you say, could I have made a better choice? Can I learn from that choice? If it turns out badly, oops, there was some unintended consequences there that I never thought of. Okay, now you learn. You say, well, why didn't I think of them? What was it? Why did I fail to think of those? And you'll learn something. So there is.
Tom, I'm making a choice, and I don't know if it's low entropy or high, but it's to just kind of pause right here. And I don't want to interrupt Tom Campbell, but I also want to be integral to our word. And we did say 1 hour. So for yeah, and we're at the top of the
just
hour.
1 hour.
And we do have quite a few more questions though. So I'm not sure, Tom, if you have any extra time.
Yeah, I'll spend extra time, of course. I'll spend extra time, and I'll try and make not so long answers, but I know the long answers are helpful to a lot of people. So when I'm answering Jeff, I know I'm not just answering Jeff and everybody else is left hanging. I know that this answers questions, for a whole lot of people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, go ahead. Let's go on with the other questions. And I'll try to be a little more succinct. But getting Tom Campbell to give a short answer is not easy.
We appreciate you, Tom. Thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for your question. I think a lot of us had the same question on our minds. So thank you. Dipali, back over to you.
Thank you, Tom. I think it was very interesting how you took the name of the organization, Entropy, and kind of like applied it to our everyday thing. Because I know when it comes to calculating entropy through physics terms, that is a different kind of calculation. So loved how you put it in everyday life. For people, if you would like to join in, feel free to stay on for a little bit longer. If you have prior commitments, thank you so much for joining us today. And you should be receiving a little bit more of an email follow-up from us just for today's event and more events that we have in future. So thank you everyone who has joined us today so far. Tom, the next question for you is by Christian. I'm just going to read the question and pop it in the chat for everyone else. Christian says, hello, Tom. I'm familiar with your healing approach and the notion that healing effectiveness is affected by the ability to maintain strong, focused intention. How does that translate to some hands-on healing methods where healer states only vague intention at the beginning and lets his or her mind wander, or do not state any intention at all because one might think that intention is applied by the sole fact of laying hands? Why such methods are effective? Maybe healing is done by collective energy or particular method, or maybe some methods work like power objects, meaning that healer is not using power of his or her own intention, but the energy or information is encoded in method by others. Sorry if I read it a little bit discombobulated, but the question for everyone's in the chat.
Okay, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different healing modalities. But there's only really one active ingredient, and that active ingredient is conscious intention modifies future probability. So an intention will change the future, modifies the probability of the future changing. It doesn't force the future to be a certain way. It just changes the probability. That's the active ingredient. Now you can do that in all kinds of ways. You have to have an intention that is well focused, so you know what it is you're doing. You can't be healing somebody while you're doing the dishes and talking to your 3-year-old at the same time. unless you're very, very practiced. Then maybe you can do that, but mostly people can't do that. They have to have their mind very focused on what they're doing. It has to be sincere. You have to really care about the other person. You really have a want to heal them. It's not just that you're going through these motions that will heal them. It's not the motions that are healing. It's the caring. That caring makes your intent more powerful. Okay, so the third thing is you need a low noise mind. If your mind is constantly jumping around, have other thoughts coming in, and these thoughts sometimes only last fractions of seconds, but if your mind is jumping, it's a noisy mind, then you won't be as strong. Okay, so the intent can be weaker or stronger. And if you practice healing, then it'll get stronger because you'll learn to get rid of that noise. You'll learn to stay focused. You'll do it because you really want to. You have a good, strong intent. Now, there's lots of tools that people use in order to get their intent focused, in order to keep their mind quiet, okay, and in order to get that intention more powerful. Lots of tools. Sometimes they feel like they need to touch because they have this idea that if they do it at a distance, that's kind of weak, but they can put their hands on somebody, then the energy can flow through them and out of their hands and into the person, and their energy heals. That's a belief. And if you have that belief, then trying to heal without touching won't work for you. Okay, because you're limited by that belief. If you believe that touching is not a requirement, that you can modify that future probability just with the intent, then you don't have to touch. And if you think that it has to do with distance and people are far away that you can't work on, then you won't be able to work on them if they're far away. And the reason for that is that where you have a belief that's contrary, like it won't work far away, it won't work without touching, then you cannot have a strong intention if you have a belief that it isn't going to work, right? That just sucks the power right out of the intention. So whatever you do, you need to use tools that represent metaphors that speak to you. If you try to use other people's metaphors, some of them will work for you and some of them won't work very well. The metaphors that resonate with you will work well. The ones that don't resonate with you won't work very well. This is a good example of that. I was teaching a course that had healing in it, and there was a lady there, and an elderly lady, maybe in her 50s or 60s. I say elderly, I'm 76, but it's just as this young girl was there in her 60s, and she said that the tools that I was using, the tools that I was talking about, like use an energy bar tool that has white energy in it, and you touch the black spots with the energy bar tool, and the tool makes the black spots go white, or you use a laser, or you cut out the black spot, or you do something to it. She said, those things are all too masculine. She says, I can't do that. I don't zap things with lasers. I don't use these tools. It just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't work. And I said, well, any metaphor will do, pick a metaphor that works for you. And after the next session, she came back and she had found the perfect metaphor. It worked for her, and her healing started to get a lot more powerful. She said she imagined that the person she was working on was this little rag doll, and she'd open up the seam. She'd go in and see the stuffing was all white, except there was some black stuffing there, and she'd pull that out, throw it away, and she'd get some white stuffing. She'd put it back, sew the rag doll up, and she had then healed that person. Okay, and that worked fine for her. You see, and then after she said that, another girl who was probably in her early 20s said, oh, can I use a magic wand like Harry Potter? And I said, of course you can. If that's a metaphor that helps you focus your intent, then it will work for you. And she did, and it worked for her. So the tools that you use can be almost anything. They have to be metaphors that you relate to at a very deep level. You relate to in a fundamental way. They can't be metaphors just of the intellect. They have to be metaphors that you relate to at the being level. And then it will work very well for you. So I tell people, make up your own metaphors, because your metaphors are going to be more powerful than somebody else's metaphors. You know, somebody else can tell you, okay, here's the way we do it, you know, and they'll give you some metaphor. But all of these tools are not fundamental. They're just metaphors to help people focus their intent. And some people feel small. I can't heal, but I have these non-physical friends who are powerful and they do the healing. I just point out Susie Q here needs to be healed, and I get one of my powerful non-physical friends to heal them. Well, that's because they feel too inadequate to do the healing themselves. They can't get much oomph into it because they have a belief that they don't have much oomph. So their tool is to get somebody else to do it for them. So there's all sorts of tools. These tools are not fundamental. They're just ways that we, things that we make up that help us focus our intent on changing the future, changing somebody being ill for somebody being healthy. Get rid of that particular. Now, there's ways of doing it that are very general. You can just say, oh, just here's some energy, do with it what you like. Or feel better. Here's some energy just to make you feel better. And let the person decide what they want to do with it or how they're going to heal it. Well, you can do that, but that intention is not as powerful to say, get rid of a lump that's cancerous and make it benign, because it's general. It's like the difference between standing in front of a window with the sun shining through the window and you say, oh, the sun feels so nice and warm. And putting a big magnifying glass up in front of that window and focusing that light to a little point where you can set things on fire. It can get so hot. You see, if you focus on a smaller thing, you can put more energy. Energy doesn't really exist. It's a metaphor. You can put more energy on the problem. So if there's a very specific problem, then a more specific focusing on that problem will work better than just a general feel better kind of a thing. So it depends on what the person has, and if the person, it could be emotional. They're just down in the dumps, not feeling good. Well, you can just go in, give them a big hug, tell them that you love them, tell them what a great person you are, and thank you very much for all the wonderful things you've done with me, and just positive stuff, everything positive you can think of. And that is the best healing for them. You don't need energy bar tools. You don't need to pull stuffing even out of a doll. It's just your feelings will help, will work there. So it depends on what the person has, what you're trying to heal. Pick metaphors that work for you. Practice with those metaphors. As those metaphors become clunky and they don't seem to fit anymore, get new metaphors. Trade in old metaphors that take more time to get new metaphors that are more efficient and take less time, but are just as effective. So that's the idea. So the question about the healing is, yes, there's hundreds of ways to go about it. Most of the metaphors come with their own limitations. Like if you have a metaphor, some of your metaphors are, well, first, if I'm going to heal someone, I need a quiet place and it needs to be dark and I need to have no interruptions. And I'm going to burn a little incense here and I'm going to sit in my meditation room and it's going to take me 20 minutes to get into the right meditation state. You see, these are all just tools that you use to get your intention focused. Well, you don't need those tools. Those tools can become rituals, and you can't do it without going through the ritual. Eventually, you can learn to dispose of all of those rituals. And just while you're walking in the park, you can be healing somebody, and you're just as effective than if you go through all that other stuff. And sometimes after you get practiced more, you don't have to just be, you have to be kind of conversation with somebody. When your friend comes up and you say, oh, my mother got bitten by a dog and, she's she's really hurting and very painful. And while she's telling you, you're working on her mother at the same time. So you can do your healing while having a conversation. It just depends. With practice, you can change your tools to be more and more efficient and more effective. You don't have to go through the rituals of doing it in a specific way. Well, that
Thank you,
wasn't
Tom.
short, but anyway, thorough, but not short.
Well, as long as Christian got his answer. So if you could see some thumbs up from Christian, that'd be great. Perfect. We actually have Estefania. She has a question for you. Estefania, over to you. If you just want to unmute yourself and just ask the question.
Thank you, Deepali. Hi, Tom. My name is Estefania. Oh my goodness, so many questions. But the initial one would be when you're speaking about, I guess it kind of hit home for me when you were speaking about acting, because part of my own practice is working with expressive arts, tools, therapy techniques, and in that, a little bit of coaching. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate more on it was 2 questions, but to tie them on that, how, because I do believe similarly, the Western view is very much what we do is what we are. It is part of our identity. And when that's taken away, it's almost like the self is erased. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate more on the gradual ways that we shift between being, doing, or that process of becoming and actually doing, and how we fluctuate between those, I don't know if they would be called metaphorical spaces or consciousness spaces, embodied spaces, because I often find that there's almost like a linear perspective to have to accomplish this, like, oh, I was doing and now I'm being, and then once that being is not there, it's not felt or experienced, like, oh no, I've left that and it's like I've regressed, and again it goes to a linear metaphor. Whereas in my own understanding, in our human nature, we shift constantly from those as we're growing, as we're experiencing, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate more on that from your point of view.
Okay,
and
so
on your own experience as well.
okay, so your question is about the acting being, the doing being dichotomy, and sometimes you're doing one and sometimes you're doing the other, and they seem to come and go, and they aren't necessarily too steady. There's lots of different tools that one can use to help one get into a being level state. And what we can do in that being level, you talked about motion, I don't know whether you intended that or not, but it sounded like you were talking about motion, like you do things, you move,
Yes, to interrupt there, I think in my own experience, working with other people who are in spiritual or doing the work, I've often heard comments around being as almost a place of no movement, of it's like it's a place. It's not a I guess it ties back to what you were mentioning right now, where healing can take place anywhere. It can take place as we're hearing someone else speaking about their mother. And I hear a lot of that for the being piece and the doing piece and the acting piece. Like they're almost places and it's very static. Okay. Whereas in my experience, they're constantly, they're breathing. Yeah. And there's gradual, very, very subtle, gradual places, like the in-between places when, like, you know what, I don't know how to explain it in everyday language.
I think I know what you mean, Estefania. Fundamentally, our consciousness has 2 ways of processing. It has the intellectual way and the intuitive way. That being level is in the intuitive path. That's who you are at the core. That's you. And that's an intuitive path. Now, we work with our intellect, with this intellectual path. That's, the tool we use there is logic, and we think about things, and we come to logical, at least we think we come to logical conclusions. Mostly we don't, but we pretend that we're logical anyway. And the other side's the intuitive side, which is beyond logic. It's not rational. We just know. On the intuitive side, it's just there. The information's there, and we know it, and it is beyond rational, beyond logical. Now, those two sides are should be working together. It's not that you just are in one or the other. They should work together. And the reason they should work together is that on the logical side, you've got this beautiful, well, on the rational or the intellectual side, you've got this tool called logic. And logic is a very precise tool. The problem is you almost never have enough information to come to some kind of a deductive conclusion. All the things in your life that are really important, you don't have enough information for them. Should I take this job? Should I marry that person? Should I have 2 children or 10? All of these important choices, in order to make that a deductive choice, you'd have to be able to know the future in order to do that. And you don't know the future. So you have this wonderfully precise tool, but the information that you have to give it is really not very good. It's ratty information. Over on the intuitive side, you've got all the information you could ever want, because all that information that are in the databases in consciousness, well, the Hindus call that Akashic records, but there's databases there, and those databases have to be there for the rendering of the reality, and that's just another subject. But the databases are there, and all that information is there. All of your past history is there. All of the past history of everybody else is there. Everybody's consciousness is there. You're netted with all other consciousness. So what other people are thinking and how they're feeling, that's all there. You've got this huge set of information, but the tool that you use to access it and process it is ratty, because you have to be in just the right moods. You have to have your mind in the right spot. You have to be clear. You have to not have noise in your mind. You have to be caring. You can't have a lot of ego or fear that gets in the way. So on one side, you've got this perfect tool with terrible information. The other side, you have this perfect information and a very ratty tool. If they work together, you got a whole person. If they work together, you can gather that information intuitively and let that intellect process that information and do something really good with it. So this thing that you're talking about, it's kind of different spaces. It's like you're here or you're there. You're in this intellectual space or you're in this intuitive space. But you kind of have to, they're hard to get there. Well, it's easy to get in the intellectual space because that's where we're brought up. That's, we've been taught to hone that since kindergarten. We've been working on honing that intellectual space and making it more useful. We're not taught about the intuitive space. So we're like 3-year-olds when it comes to that intuitive space. We don't have it well under control. It works sometimes it doesn't, because we haven't really taken the time to develop it. Fact is, with practice, you can develop that intuitive side to be just as accurate and just as reliable. Actually, I would say more reliable and more correct than the intellectual side. But it takes practice to do that. And most people don't do that practice. They don't work on it. So most of us say, well, I'm in this intuitive space, okay, and I have to get in a meditation state to do that. And I'm in this intellectual space. Well, that's where I live my life. That's how I spend my day at work. I'm in this intellectual space. And it's hard for me to get in an intuitive space. And if I'm in one, I'm not in the other. I kind of bounce back. But real life isn't like that. Real life, it's shared. You're in both spaces at the same time. And the spaces begin to feel like a place. Oh, that is that intuitive place and that intellectual place. and I bounce around in those. And sometimes I want to get there and I can't. Well, the point is that if you practice and if you develop both sides, they work together instead of the intellect being the bully that tells the intuitive to go away. Hey, intuitive side, we call you woo-woo. We don't pay any attention to you. The intellect tends to be the bully. Take charge. I'm in charge here. I figure things out. And once you get that to stop, the two of them work together really, really well. And you find you live in both places at the same time. You have this intuitive pace and you're in that. It's part of your life. It's part of your everyday life and your work life, everything. That intuitive space is a part of it. And your intellect is part of your life too. So basically you get to a point where the intuitive and the intellectual work together and you live your whole life in both spaces at the same time. So your normal interaction, say at work or with other people or with your family, it's whatever it needs to be, 80% intuitive, 20% intellectual, and it just zigs and zags back and forth between those things as needed. And you just live in a larger reality and you have a lot more information and choices in your reality. You have a bigger decision space. And that's what happens when you develop both sides. It's not here and there. It's not, oh, I have to go meditate to get in this space, because your life is a meditation. You're always, that intuitive space is always available to you. And that intellect is always available to you. And they're not separate spaces. They're just one integrated space. You just happen to live in a reality that's much larger than most people. Most people live in a little reality that's just intellectual. And sometimes they can jump over and be intuitive, but they can't do both at once very well. And they seem separate and they bounce back between them. And it gets a little confusing, which is maybe what you're talking about. These things come and go, and where am I and what am I doing and what's important? And just keep going and you'll find that your whole life will be both mixed perfectly to exactly what you need for at any particular time. Sometimes you're 90% intellectual and 10% intuitive, and sometimes just the opposite. But it's all happens organically without you having to say, get in a meditation state first. You don't have to. Your life's a meditation. It's just there whenever you need it. Then and the rational part's just there whenever you need it. So that's really where you're trying to get to, is not separate places that do separate things, but just the whole places where you live. And your life is a mixture of both. And both your intellect and your intuition are in the service of being helpful, in the service of caring about other people and becoming love.
Thank you, Tom. So we have last two questions. Thank you so much for your patience, everyone, and Tom, especially you. We have a question from Jennifer. She has been trying to ask this question for quite some time now. So Jennifer, over to you.
Hi again, Tom.
Yeah.
Hi again,
Hello.
Vanessa. And hello, everyone that I haven't met yet. This actually is a different question that I originally emailed Vanessa, but that's okay. I can still get those a different time. So anyway, this question was, okay, how do I discern between what's important enough to consider that there might be more to think about here? When I get intuitive thoughts or feelings, which I think has happened all my life, but I never thought much of it. Doesn't everybody have them, and did they just ignore them, which I kind of just stopped paying attention afterwards. For example, there's certain scenes in movies that deeply disturb me, so much so that it affects me for days and I can't stop thinking about them. And my dreams, they can be so horrifying, or even if they're not nightmarish, there's just something about the way the dream makes me feel. And that feeling is so strong in me, and it can affect my mood for hours and hours, if not days. And so I can ask, why am I so upset and affected by this? And like physically, my body even gets affected. And they'll say, just don't read too much into things. Not everything means something, Mom. But I can't stop thinking about it. So anyway, then I have been playing around with like oracle decks and stuff. And I drew a card before I had a job interview, which was my first job since years of being a stay-at-home mom, which I did. and the card that I drew was just simply no. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll just not to think too much about it. Went for the interview and I got the job on the spot. But then after 2 shifts, I couldn't work because my entire body ached so much and it hurt to even turn over in bed at night. And I thought, what am I doing? Like, what is this telling me? And so then I feel like you're just going to say it's really just practice and it'll get easier to tell what the difference is between knowing if something's just a feeling or if it's means something more. But I guess I kind of want to know your opinion on that and why the whole dreams in the movies thing affects me so much.
Okay. The things affect you so much probably because there's something in that movie or something in that dream that's triggering something about you. It's something personal about you that gets triggered when you see that movie.
But they're really, really horrible things.
Yeah,
and I keep thinking, I hope I didn't do anything like that in my past, you know, but.
No, it might not necessarily be, you know, anything just like that, but it may be triggering, let's say, a fear of the unknown or a fear of death, the fear of death. It could be, you know, things like that, not necessarily, you know, a fear of horrible monsters with a chainsaw, you know, it could be, you know, just a fear of the unknown, that something could get you, something can jump in and change your life so dramatically like that. And if you have that fear, if that fear's in there, then you see these things and they trigger that fear. And if they
it's
trigger,
like something inside me drops, like drops inside me, like physically I can feel like this emptiness, like, or like, oh, and I won't go away. I don't know how to get out of that feeling. Every time the image or whatever triggers me, I get that feeling. Yeah, it's just, yeah, well, I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah. Next time you get that feeling, just instead of struggling with it or pandering to it, either one, just look at it and say, where is that connected to me? What's the connection to me? All right, I saw that movie and it's not about, you know, monsters with big fangs and 2 heads. It's something else. What is it about, you know, what is it that bothers me? And see if you can't find out what the connection to you is. There'll probably be some fear in you that makes that connection. And if you find out what that is, that'll probably be the first step toward dealing with it. If you can see, how is it connected? Right now, it's connected to you in just some way you don't understand. You know, something happens and you get affected. But spend some time with it and say, well, what really do I feel? What is it? Do I feel afraid, or do I feel vulnerable, or do I feel, you know, unsafe, or what is it exactly? And work on that for a while and see if you can't get closer to what it is that does it. And then once you kind of get that answer, then you need to start looking for solutions, which we already talked about. You know, how do you deal with fears, and how do you deal with things like that? So that would be one suggestion, is next time it happens, try to get to the bottoms of it. What's the connection to you personally? Because there is some personal connection, because you personalize whatever it is you see. And another hint would be, think of all the different kinds of images that have that effect on you and see what they have in common. What's the common thread through all of them? That will be helpful to you understanding what the issue is. And
yeah,
then,
I thought about doing that.
Yeah, and then
writing all the stuff down that.
Yeah, write it all down.
Each one?
Yeah, this is what bothers me. And then think about it. Well, was it the fact that the monster had fangs? Was that it? Or was it the horns on his head? Or was it the fact that he was colored blue? You know, what is it? Or is it the whole, you know, is all of it? Try to get as specific as you can about what the problem is. Then you need to try to remove yourself from that fear, that problem. It's not about me. Okay, I see it in a movie. It's just about that movie, and disassociate it from being about you and your life. But you probably can't do that until you understand what the fear is. So I'd say that would be one way to start, working on that problem. Analyze what kind of images, what kind of thoughts, what kind of things that are about to happen, maybe is what's key. There's probably some similarity to all those things that will ring a bell as to what it is that's getting to you. Then why does it get to you? Why is it connected? And then basically use your intent to disown it, to separate yourself from it, to say that doesn't have anything to do with me. That's just my fear, and I'm going to let that go. So that would be what I try that first, see how that works. Obviously, you're taking something personally in those images.
I think it's that I think I can feel what they're feeling almost in those situations. A lot of it is psychological torture kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like there's a scene in a movie where the guy, it's in the new one, about the train. Everyone's stuck on the train because they can't live outside anymore. And the guy gets his arms stuck out the window and frozen off. And that scene, I can't even, I don't know why. I guess I'm thinking about what it must be like to be that guy.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, and I
Yeah.
mean, that's hard to disassociate from, because then, I mean, if it could happen in
Well,
real life, those sort of
yeah.
situations.
Well, that's empathy, having
Mhm.
empathy for that person, feeling that person's feelings, and feeling them to the extent that you take them on. That is that. But you need to be empathetic. It's good to be empathetic, but you need to also accept that things just are the way they are. Sometimes people have their arms frozen off. Sometimes people fall off cliffs. Sometimes people are run over by a herd of buffalo. Whatever you see, things like that can happen. And it's just life is like that. You don't have to personalize it and internalize it. Just accept that life is sometimes horrible. Life is sometimes difficult. Life is sometimes, very painful, very traumatic. It is, and it is the way it is. And if those things happen, then we deal the best we can with them. You deal with what you have to deal with. So that guy with the frozen arm is going to have to deal with that. It might not be fun, but he'll deal with it somehow. And 5 years later, he'll still be a successful guy, and he'll just have one stubby arm and one long arm, and he'll learn to compensate and go on in life and be just fine. He'll get married, have a bunch of kids, and be happy, live happily ever after. You just have to see that is stuff that can happen, and that people deal with it. You deal with whatever you have to deal with, and that you can too deal with whatever you have to deal with. Life is sometimes like that, and accept it. It's okay. You can't, you can't make life perfect for yourself, much less for everybody else. And everybody's here. We all have lessons. We all learn from them. We all sometimes have very hard lessons, and we sometimes have easy lessons and things that are fun. That's part of being here. So, this particular person may be having a very hard lesson to deal with it, but he's got lessons too. How's he going to deal with that? His arm got frozen off. Is he going to deal with it and be full of self-pity? Oh, why me? Why did I have to be stuck here? Why my arm, and get miserable with self-pity? Or is he going to accept it and say, well, that's just what happened. Now I got to make the best of it and be positive. I got to learn how to get by with one arm. That's the positive way to do it. So lessons are there for everybody, as hard lessons, and sometimes they're easy lessons and sometimes they're hard, but you can grow from anything. Everything you see is a learning opportunity, and that'll take some of the sting out of it for you and for other people. People who are empathic it's not just empathy. Empathy is where you can feel other people's feelings. You associate with other people. But if you're just empathic, that's all right, because you understand it. Sometimes people are sad, sometimes they're unhappy, sometimes they're miserable, sometimes they're screaming, but that's just part of life, and they have to deal with all of that positively, and you can maybe be helpful for them to do that. But what gets an empath in trouble is when they want everybody just to be happy. They need everyone to be smiling all the time. They have to have, happiness everywhere. Otherwise, it upsets them because they don't want to live in a world that has horrible things in it, unhappy things in it, because those horrible, unhappy things might get to them someday. And so they have to fix everything and everybody. And now they're empathic and they feel all this misery and unhappiness, and it upsets them and makes them miserable, and they have to learn how to cut it off. Well, an empath can, if they understand consciousness well enough, they can just turn it off. They can turn it off selectively. An empath will walk into a place like, I don't know where you are, but like a Kmart or a Walmart or something, on Black Friday or some day when it's a total, mess of vibes that are not all that friendly. And they just can't go in the store. They'll walk in the store and say, I got to leave, they turn around and go back out because it's just too much, Well, they can just turn that off. They can say, well, I only want to get connected to the people in here who are happy, having a good time. And then all the happy people are still there. And there's maybe 20 people in that store that are happy. And there's probably another 120 that aren't. But they only connect to the happy ones. So you can open and close channels willfully. You can control what you connect to and what you don't connect to. So you take it personally as the problem, and you want it to not be that way. Well, you're not the master of the universe. You don't get it to be the way you want it, and you just have to accept that it is that way. And it's other people just have to learn from it and grow from it. And that's where they are in their life. And you have to let them be.
Makes you appreciate the good things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Tom, and everyone for everyone's patience. We have last question by Sahara. I hope I'm saying your name right. If not, just correct me. And then we pass it on to Vanessa to wrap up today's session. So Sarah, your question to Tom.
Hi, everyone. I have a question about me seeing myself from how can I say? I try to be nice if I can. My boyfriend tells you are being overkind, which is taking your own time. Sometimes be self-centered, put yourself first. But helping makes me feel good and forget about my need and peace. Am I kind of acting kind, or isn't it is being a people pleaser, or I am kind? I came out of trauma trying to get help. I get sad and angry sometimes for the bad things is happening to others. I always have a wish to be able to make peace in people's who are suffering from the same situations that I experienced. My question is, am I acting kind, or am I a people pleaser, or I am kind?
Well, probably some of both. I mean, most people are a mixture of all kinds of things. It's very seldom that you say, oh, here's a person and they are just nothing but love, and here's a person and they're nothing but self-centeredness. We're all a mixture of a lot of things going on. So you're probably some of that sometimes, and some of the others other times. But a good way to find out in your own mind is, if you said that you like helping people, you like doing things for people, and it makes you feel happy. Well, if it makes you feel happy, then you're probably doing it for the right reasons. If it makes you feel happy, then I'd say that's good. You are kind, because when you are kind, doing things for people makes you feel happy. Now, when you're acting kind, it makes you maybe feel happy that other people see you as being kind, but after a while, you start feeling like, I do everything for everybody else, and then nobody does anything for me. You start feeling negative about it. That's somebody who's been acting kind for a long time, and now they are getting, can I say, it's creating negativity in them. It's creating dissonance in them because they see I give and I give and I give all the time, but nobody gives anything to me. I just give and everybody else takes, and they start feeling sorry for themselves. And in that case, obviously, all of that kindness and all of that giving really wasn't at the being level. It was all acting, you see. So if you actually just feel good about it, I'm being kind to people and I like it and it gives me joy in my life, then you really are kind, because you're not just acting. Acting runs dry after a while. You maybe get a little bit of good feelings from it as, oh, everybody looks at me and finds value in me because I'm so kind and I just playing to that. Well, that's image. But that only lasts so long. You can't live an image. Eventually the image wears thin and you begin to resent that. You don't like it. And you're always aware of what other people are thinking of you. It's all about, well, I'm doing this and I'm being helpful. And, hopefully other people will notice how helpful I am. Well, then you're probably acting. If you're just helping people because they need help and you feel good about it, then you're just probably being kind. So that's the way to do it. But now you also mentioned that sometimes you get angry and upset because people are feeling bad or people have hardships. And people get sometimes angry and upset just because the world is such an unfriendly place. They look at the news and they see, all the death and destruction and nasty people taking advantage of each other. They look out in the world and it makes them angry. Well, if that makes you angry, you become part of the problem, not part of the solution. It needs not to make you angry. You need to look at it and say, well, that is the way it is. Those people are like that. Everybody's not so grown up. A lot of people are still very self-centered and trying to take advantage of other people. And the world is like that. Not make you angry. You just understand it. Not only you understand it, you realize that you don't want to contribute to it. So you're not going to get angry. You're going to smile. You're going to be happy. And you're going to let these people be however they are, because that's just where they are. And, we get that a lot. Is it Sahara?
Sahara.
Say it again.
Sahara.
We get that, Sahara, when it's family, people we know really well, our friends, and we see them fighting with each other. We see them calling each other's names and being negative and being self-centered with each other. And it breaks our heart because we know that they're just hurting themselves and hurting each other. They're in this dysfunctional thing, and you want to go shake them and say, stop being negative, stop complaining, stop, all this fear stuff, but it won't help. All that does is make everybody angry. Now both of them will get together and be angry with you, and you'll be angry with them, and you just make the situation worse. You have to look and say, well, that's where they are in their own growth toward becoming love. They're still at the point where they fuss and fume and have a lot of fear and are angry and full of negativity and complaining. And that's just where they are. I just have to let them be how they are, because you can't make anybody else grow up. You have to let them grow up on their own. So rather than going in and telling them to be quiet, both of you, just stop, that won't help. That'll make it worse. You just go and give them a hug. Give them a hug, say something nice to them, say something positive and give them a hug, and then leave them alone to be however they are. So interject as much positiveness as you can to them and into their life without ever getting pulled into their negativity. Otherwise, their negativity then makes you negative. You start feeling bad about them and for them. So now you're feeling bad, they're feeling bad, and you see that feeling bad just grows, and pretty soon everybody in the family's feeling bad, and all that feeling badness is just not helpful. So what you do is you just be positive. Look at them, tell them you love them, give them a hug, and change the subject. If they refuse, they just want to keep fighting, then you just walk away, let them be, and realize that They're learning. It maybe not very quickly. They maybe make the same mistake over and over again, but you can't help that. You just can be positive. That's what you can do, is to be positive with that. So don't let other people's negativity pull you down. You stay happy, you stay smiling, you stay good, even though you live in a world that's nasty with a lot of nasty people in it, even though you have family members that are, complaining and fussing and pointing their fingers and blaming each other for all kinds of things. Well, that's just the way they are. And you have compassion for them. You love them. You try to be as positive as you can to them. And that way you always stay part of the solution and you never become part of the problem. Whereas if you get upset because they're upset, you become part of the problem, you see? So you are no doubt empathic. You feel what people feel. You want to be helpful because it makes you feel good when people feel good because you helped. And that, I think, is just being real. And if your boyfriend says that, you need to assert yourself more and make things, be your way, well, he probably says that because everybody thinks that everybody else is just like them. So your boyfriend thinks that you think and feel the way he thinks and feels. And if those people were doing that to him, that would aggravate him and make him upset. And he'd think that's just wrong. And for you, it's not wrong. It's okay. You don't mind. You're happy to help out, you see? So he's probably projecting himself on you. And everybody does that. You do that too. You project yourself on other people. And you're thinking, why can't they just be nice? Because you're nice and you think everybody should be nice. And you just can't understand why people are like that. So we do tend to think that other people think, act, and feel like we do, because we're our only model that we have to work on. We are a ruler by which we measure everybody else. So he's probably just trying to help you out, but tell him that you really don't mind. And maybe he's trying to tell you that he'd like more of your time to be concerned about him. And you're spending time helping other people, and he'd just as soon have all that attention. Maybe he's telling you he needs more attention. And he does that by complaining about the attention you give other people. It's hard to say, but whatever it is, you treat him the same way. And anybody that's unhappy, you give him a hug and a smile, and you say something positive. That's how you treat people who are unhappy. You treat them with being positive. That's how you connect with them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Tom. We've taken up way too much of your time. This was an hour over what we originally intended.
Yeah, but we've had a lot of fun, Vanessa, and that's important.
We did have a lot of fun. Yeah, this was fantastic. There was a lot of comments coming in. People are super grateful. This is really helpful. They learned a lot. Thank you for your wisdom. So would love to have you back again sometime. I know that you're super busy, especially with COVID now. Now you can do your events. So Tom actually does events where all over the world, and you can come and participate in these like 5 to 6 day immersives and learn from Tom directly. So highly recommend those.
Yeah, got one coming up, I think week after next, something like that, sometime in the near future.
A week after next? An
I think
in-person
so.
one? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've got something coming up very short term. Yeah, in a couple of weeks anyway. It's an immersive. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The last immersive, I think. Keith wants to. We're going to stop doing immersives and do a thing called. I don't know. You'll have to go to Keith's website and he'll explain it to you.
Okay.
I just work here. I don't make up any rules anyway.
You just show up. Well,
I
we'll
just show
send
up and
you.
talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been super helpful. Everybody, thank you for coming and staying on. I know that we'd only originally planned for an hour, so thanks for staying with us. We will send out more information about the campaign that's going on, so be prepared for that. Mahira will be sending that out to you, so keep an eye out for that. If you did find value in this Connect Circle, then we encourage you to check out our campaign, make a donation so we can do more of these. The link is in the chat, and again, we'll send out an email with more details around that. So thank you, everybody. And we hope to connect with you all again soon. And thank you, Tom. Much
You're very
love.
welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming and giving me an opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye.
So long.
So long.